The crystal vases on Caroline's dining table caught the evening light and threw it across the ceiling like ripples. I basted the turkey every 30 minutes, rotated trays of rosemary potatoes, and set the glaze to shine. Strangers admired the food as if it had fallen from the sky. My name was not mentioned once. Caroline tapped a water glass with her fingernail and lifted her chin. "Staff will plate the guests first," she said, voice smooth, practiced. "Mom, you can eat in the kitchen once everyone is served." Something inside me made a small, decisive sound, the way ice splits on a winter sidewalk. I did not argue. I did not look toward the head of the table, where Alan smiled, or toward the children lined up in new sweaters. I held the carving knife long enough to feel its weight, then set it down and reached for the roasting pan. The air smelled of orange peel and thyme. I slid the mitts over my hands, lifted the turkey, and felt the heft of it, heavy and honest. The room went quiet in a curious, tilted way, as if the house had leaned closer. Caroline kept talking about the slideshow, about the toast after dessert, about schedules. I walked past the sideboard with the wedding photo I paid 4 years ago, past the framed awards that needed dusting, past the guests who shifted aside without meeting my eyes. No one asked where I was going. The front door opened with its familiar sigh. The cold met my face and steadied me. Arlington's evening had the clean bite of late autumn. I could hear traffic in and a dog barking behind a hedge. The pan was hot through the mitts, but the juice did not slosh. I balanced it the way you balance a sleeping child. I passed the lit windows of the houses on Linden Street, each a small theater with its own script. My old cottage waited 3 blocks away, quiet as a kept secret. Inside, the hallway held the faint scent of lemon soap and paper. I set the turkey on the counter and exhaled. The ticking clock in the breakfast nook remembered me. The silence did not scold or manage. It accepted. I used a blue-flowered plate, carved a generous slice, and spooned drippings until they pooled like amber. I sat at my own table and ate slowly. The skin cracked. The meat was tender. No one asked me to hurry. No one explained how to cut. I tasted the work of my hands and felt my heartbeat settle. When the plate was clean, I washed it, dried it, and returned it to its place. Outside, maple leaves clattered against the gutter. I stood at the window, the house breathing, and understood that the door I had walked through was not an exit. It was a beginning. The morning came pale and sharp, sunlight falling across the wood floor in uneven squares. I woke without an alarm, without the rustle of someone else's household dictating my rhythm. For the first time in months, I stretched beneath my own quilt and felt the weight of silence, not as punishment, but as relief. The turkey sat wrapped in foil on the counter, its aroma still clinging to the air. I brewed tea, strong and dark, and cut a cold slice. The flavor deepened overnight, juices set into the fibers of the meat. I chewed slowly, letting it anchor me to something that belonged only to me. It was ordinary food, but it tasted like freedom. Caroline's words from the night before replayed in my mind. Calm, efficient, dismissive. You'll sit in the kitchen with the staff. No spite, no heat, just the casual cruelty of someone who no longer saw me as mother, only as obligation. It wasn't new. It was simply the first time I couldn't excuse it away. I thought of Martin, my late husband, whose laugh used to fill this kitchen when we were young and broke, but still ours. He believed in my stubborn streak. He'd say, "Ellie, you could dig a hole straight through rock if you wanted." After he passed, I tried to carry that grit, but it wore down under the years. Caroline had been only too eager to tell me where to sit, what to sign, what not to bother with. And then there was Anna. Dear Anna. The daughter who never raised her voice at me, who held my hand when arthritis flared, who called late at night just to say she loved me. 10 years gone, cancer stealing her body, but not her gentleness. She had left me Lily, her daughter, my granddaughter, who was now grown into a thoughtful young woman. Lily had Anna's eyes, always searching, always seeing more than people wanted her to. I stared at the family photo still pinned to the fridge. Caroline's family posed perfectly in front of a beach sunset, clothes coordinated, smiles rehearsed, but tucked beside it was an older picture. Anna holding Lily, at 5 years old, cheeks flushed with flour from baking cookies in this very kitchen. No polish, no performance, just love captured mid-laugh. My throat tightened. Caroline wanted me tucked into the background, invisible unless useful. But Anna's memory whispered something else. I hadn't lost everything. I hadn't lost myself. Not yet. I poured a second cup of tea and sat at the table with a notepad. My handwriting was slow, uneven, but steady enough. I wrote one line across the top of the page. Take it back. Underneath, I began listing what that meant. Check the accounts, call the lawyer, review the papers Caroline had me sign last spring. Each item felt like a breath drawn deeper than the last. The clock on the wall ticked softly. Time had not abandoned me. It was waiting, and so was I. The folder sat on the bookshelf where Caroline had placed it months ago, labeled in her tidy handwriting, House and Finances. I had avoided it, trusting her efficiency, telling myself it was easier to let her handle the details. Now, with the list I'd written the night before folded in my pocket, I pulled the folder down and carried it to the kitchen table. Inside were neatly clipped bills, receipts, and statements. Too neat. Every page bore Caroline's order, but beneath that order, I saw something else, her control tightening like a slow knot. The utility bills, once in my name, now bore hers. The phone plan was listed as streamlined. A note in her script read, Consolidation makes things easier. Easier for her, not me. I turned page after page, my heart tightening. Then I found the joint checking account statement. Caroline had added herself as an authorized user last year. She'd smiled that day, saying, Just in case of emergencies, Mom. I remembered her hand over mine as she slid the form across the counter. My throat burned at how easily I'd agreed. Scrolling through the statement, I saw the slow bleed. $300 for school extras, $450 for tuition transfers, ride shares, streaming subscriptions I never used. Each transaction was small enough to look harmless, but together they painted the truth. It wasn't theft in one stroke, it was erosion, bit by bit, until I no longer recognized the shoreline of what used to be mine. I closed the folder and stared at the chipped ceramic lamp on the counter. Caroline had once said it was outdated, that I should let it go. But I kept it, stubbornly. Now I understood why. It was proof that I still had the right to choose what stayed. The kettle whistled softly. I poured hot water over a tea bag, hands steady despite the storm inside me. Across the kitchen, the photo of Anna and Lily caught the light. Anna's eyes seemed to meet mine, as if urging me to keep going, to not stop at discovery, but to act. I opened my laptop. The bank's website blinked on the screen. My password had expired, but I knew the answers to my own questions. My mother's maiden name, the town where I was born. Caroline hadn't thought to change those. Relief hit me when I logged in successfully. My savings sat untouched, still mine, still waiting. I jotted down a note, visit bank in person, remove her access, print records. The words looked sharp and decisive in my shaky script. The walls of the house felt different around me. They weren't a cage, not anymore. The cage had been my silence, my trust misplaced. Now I could see the bars clearly, and that meant I could break them. I closed the folder, slid it back onto the table, and whispered to the empty room, not anymore. The next morning, I dressed with intention. Not the soft cardigans Caroline favored for me, but slacks pressed sharp, and a navy sweater that still carried Martin's compliment from years ago. Ellie, you look like a woman who makes decisions. I pinned my silver beret into place. The one Anna had once said made me look unstoppable. The air in Arlington was brisk as I stepped onto the bus. No chauffeured rides. No, where are you going, Mom? Just me, the hum of the engine, and strangers who didn't care if I was old or independent. By the time the bus hissed to a stop in front of the bank, my hands were steady. Inside, the marble floor gleamed, reflecting fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly overhead. A young man at the counter glanced up. His name tag read Ethan. His polite smile faltered into hesitation, the kind reserved for women my age, half expecting tears or confusion. "How can I help you today, ma'am?" "I need to remove an authorized user from my accounts," I said, sliding my ID across the counter. My voice did not waver. His eyebrows lifted slightly. "Of course. Let's step into one of our offices." 10 minutes later, I sat at a polished desk, papers spread before me. Ethan explained each form, his tone slow, careful, as though I might miss a word. But I didn't. I read every line, signed with a hand that refused to tremble. "There are recurring transfers here," he noted, eyes flicking to the screen. "A monthly tuition payment, some smaller automatic services. Do you want to keep those?" "Cancel everything," I said. "All of them?" "All of them." He hesitated, then nodded. "We can also flag the account in case someone tries to re-establish access without your consent." "Yes," I said firmly. "Do that." When the last form was signed, he gathered the papers and said softly, "Most people wait until the damage is done. You're ahead of it." I didn't reply. I simply met his eyes until he looked away. From the bank, I walked 3 blocks to an old brick building. The brass plaque beside the door read, "Shepard and Associates, Attorneys at Law." Mr. Shepard had drawn up Martin's will decades ago. I wondered if he would even remember me. He did. His hair was whiter, his back a little bent, but his handshake was still firm. "Eleanor," he said, his eyes kind. "It's been too long. What brings you in?" "I want to revise my will," I said without hesitation. "And I want to set up a living trust for my granddaughter Lily." He nodded slowly. "We can do that, and it will protect everything from interference." Then his expression grew serious. "Eleanor, you should know something. Last year, your daughter Caroline inquired about obtaining financial power of attorney. I refused without your presence. She wasn't pleased, my breath caught, but then I felt the corners of my mouth lift, not in humor, but in vindication. I had been right to come." I leaned forward, voice steady. "Then let's make sure she never has another chance." By the time I returned home, the voicemail icon blinked like a warning light. Caroline's voice filled the kitchen when I pressed play. Tight, urgent, sharpened with panic. "Mom, what have you done at the bank? Transfers are failing. Tuition's overdue. This is serious. Call me back immediately." Another message followed, then another, each one wrapped in politeness but trembling with anger underneath. I didn't respond. I set the phone face down and brewed tea instead. The kettle's whistle was calmer than her words. That evening, a knock came at the door. When I opened it, Lily stood there, cheeks flushed from the cold, holding a white paper bag that smelled faintly of cinnamon. "I brought those pastries you used to like," she said, stepping inside. I set them on the counter and poured her tea. She sat quietly for a while, eyes on the steam curling above her cup. Then she said, "Mom's furious. She thinks you've embarrassed her, but honestly," she paused, then met my eyes. "I think you did the right thing." A weight lifted in my chest. "Do you?" "Yes, she treats you like an employee, not her mother. I've seen it for years. You've been patient longer than anyone else would have been." Her honesty stung, not because it was harsh, but because it was true. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Thank you for saying it." She pulled a small key ring from her coat pocket and slid it across the table. "I had copies made. One for you, one for me, so I can come by but whenever you want, or in case of emergencies." The keys clinked softly against the wood. I picked them up, feeling their weight. "Do I get a say in the keychain?" I teased. Her smile widened. "Non-negotiable. That pink one stay for the first time in weeks," I laughed. But peace never lasts long with Caroline. The next afternoon, she appeared on my porch with a foil-covered dish balanced in her hands. Her smile was too bright, stretched thin like glass about to crack. "Mom," she said sweetly, "I thought I'd bring your Tupperware back. And some leftovers." We had plenty. I stared at the dish, but didn't move to take it. I have food. Her smile faltered. You've been avoiding me. We need to talk about what you did. I stepped back just enough to keep the threshold between us. There's nothing to discuss. Her eyes narrowed, the charm slipping. You're making a mistake. No, I said quietly. I'm correcting one. Her breath caught. She stood frozen for a moment, then thrust the dish toward me again. I shook my head. Finally, she lowered it, muttered something I couldn't hear, and walked away. I closed the door, leaned against it, and whispered into the quiet, not this time. That night I opened a worn wooden box from the back of the closet. Inside were Anna's letters, still sealed in faded envelopes. The first one I unfolded said simply, "Never let anyone make you invisible." I traced the ink with my finger, then set pen to paper and began a new letter. This one for Lily. The storm broke 2 days later. I had just settled into my chair by the window, a book open on my lap, when the front door banged hard enough to rattle the glass. Caroline didn't wait for me to answer. She pushed inside, her heels striking the hardwood like gunfire. "Mother, what have you done?" Her voice was sharp, brittle, every syllable trembling. I closed the book calmly and set it aside. "Hello, Caroline." She dropped her handbag onto the sofa and spun toward me. "Don't play polite. I got the notice from the lawyer. You revoked everything. The will, the trust, you cut me out like I was nothing." I folded my hands in my lap. "You weren't cut out. You were never entitled to what wasn't yours." Her cheeks flushed. "I took care of you. You lived under my roof for over a year, free, and this is how you repay me?" I leaned back in my chair, voice quiet but steady. "I didn't live under your roof. I cooked your meals, cleaned your house, fetched your children from school, paid half the bills you pretended were gifts. That wasn't care, Caroline. That was arrangement. And I will not do arrangements that erase me." For a moment, her mouth opened, but no sound came. She had prepared for guilt, for tears, for the mother who always backed down. She had not prepared for clarity. "You're being dramatic," she spat. "No," I said softly. "I'm being exact." She began pacing, hands flapping as if to shake off my words. "You're going to leave everything to Lily? She's 22. She doesn't know the first thing about finances." "She'll learn," I replied. "I should have been part of that conversation," she snapped. "You had years," I said evenly. "Years to treat me like a person, not a burden. You chose not to." Her face twisted, a war between anger and disbelief. "I didn't mean to hurt you. You just didn't care if you did." The silence that followed, pressed heavy, broken only by the ticking of the clock on the mantel. Finally, she dropped into the chair across from me, her shoulders slumped. "You could have said something sooner." "I did," I said. "You didn't hear it. Or maybe you did and chose to ignore it." Her eyes glistened, though she blinked quickly, refusing to let tears fall. "So what now? You're done with me?" I looked at her, really looked. The daughter I had raised, fed, protected, now a stranger in her own certainty. I felt no hatred, only exhaustion. "No, Caroline, I'm not done with you, but I'm done living under your conditions." The words landed with the finality of a gavel. She stood abruptly, grabbed her handbag, and stalked to the door. "You'll regret this," she hissed. I shook my head. "No, I'll finally live with myself." The door shut quietly behind her. I locked it, not from fear, but from ownership. The day after Caroline stormed out, I woke to a lightness I hadn't felt in years. No messages to answer, no one telling me when to sit or what to wear, just my own breath in the quiet house. It was enough. A week later, I signed a lease for a modest apartment on the second floor of a brick building near Arlington's Central Park. 2 rooms and a small kitchen. Nothing grand, but the windows faced east. Morning light spilled in like honey, soft and golden, washing the walls in warmth. That mattered more than square footage or polished floors. Rachel, my Lily, helped me move. We carried boxes up the narrow stairs, laughing when we found old things I had nearly forgotten. Anna's recipe cards, Martin's cufflinks, my sewing box untouched for years. When we finished, she placed a framed print of a lemon tree above the sink. "It looks like you," she said, smiling. "Rooted, but still growing." I chose sage green paint for the kitchen cabinets. As I brushed color across the old wood, I felt the years of Caroline's "too old for this" peel away. My arms ached, but it was my ache, earned by my choice, my space. One afternoon, I opened the sewing box. The lid creaked, the threads and scraps inside smelling faintly of cedar. I pulled out soft blue cotton I'd once planned to turn into a dress for Lily. My fingers moved slowly, clumsy at first, but memory returned like an old friend. I didn't need to finish the dress. Beginning was enough. It reminded me my hands still knew how to create, not just maintain. I also rediscovered music. Dusting off the stereo, I slid in an old CD marked Jazz Favorites. When the first notes of Nina Simone's voice filled the room, something inside me loosened. I swayed a little in my socks, knees protesting, but I moved anyway. Not for an audience, just for me. One morning at dawn, I took a walk around the block. The air smelled of damp leaves and chimney smoke. The sidewalks glistened from last night's rain, and the bakery on the corner already hummed with ovens. I felt part of the day again, not a shadow in someone else's house. That was when I met Mrs. Delgado, my neighbor down the hall. 80 years old, cane covered in floral stickers, eyes bright with mischief. She caught me fumbling with the new mailbox lock and chuckled. "Don't worry," she said. "The trick is to pull while you turn. Everything in this building's a little stubborn." We ended up talking for 20 minutes in the hallway about arthritis remedies, old movies, and which market sold the sweetest oranges. When she leaned closer and whispered, "So, are you here because of family or freedom?" I didn't hesitate. "Because I finally remembered I get to choose," I said. Her smile widened. "Then you're in the right place." And for the first time in decades, I believed it. The morning of my 73rd birthday arrived quietly. No balloons, no orchestrated dinner where I was an afterthought. Just soft light pouring through my apartment window, and the smell of coffee filling the air. When I opened the door, a small note was taped to the frame in Lily's handwriting. "Happy birthday, Grandma. You remind me who I want to become." I pressed the note to my chest. It was better than any gift. I made myself pancakes, just two, with a little butter and syrup, and ate them slowly at the table, while the sun spread across the floorboards. Afterward, I opened the drawer where my new binder rested, the living trust, the will, the letters. I slipped in one more page, folded carefully. "Lily, everything I have is yours, not because of blood, but because of kindness. You never tried to manage me. You just met me where I stood. That's love. That's legacy. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." I placed it behind the trust documents and closed the binder with steady hands. That afternoon, Lily stopped by with a bouquet of wildflowers. We cooked together simple roasted carrots and chicken seasoned with lemon and herbs. As we ate, she said softly, "I don't want to end up like Mom. Cold, controlling." I reached across the table. "You won't." "Because you're already asking the questions she never could." Her eyes shimmered, and for the first time in a long while, I felt the circle close. The love Anna had given me, the love I had tried to pour into both my daughters, was alive in Lily. Not perfect, not loud, but honest. When she left, the apartment didn't feel empty. It felt full of laughter, of conversation, of possibility. I tidied the dishes, poured myself a glass of wine, and sat by the window. Outside, the street lights flickered on. A boy pedaled past on his bicycle, nearly tipping under the weight of his backpack. The world moved on, unbothered by my peace, and I realized something. Healing doesn't always come as a roar or a grand gesture. Sometimes it arrives as a quiet return, to soup simmering on the stove, to music you dance to alone, to the knowledge that your worth doesn't need anyone's permission. Caroline still calls. Her messages stack up, heavy with guilt and need. I don't hate her, but I don't answer either. Boundaries aren't cruel, they're necessary. If you've ever sat silent in a house you helped build, waiting for permission to belong, let this be your reminder. You don't need their blessing to reclaim yourself. You just need to begin. And on that birthday, with the binder tucked safely in my drawer and Lily's note pinned to the fridge, I finally did.